Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kaustubha. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/Wisdom of the Sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from Super Soul Farm in beautiful upstate New York, this is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast with your host, Raghunath, and co-host and senior educator at the Bhakti Center, Kaustubha Das. Welcome to the show, and welcome to Sleep In Sunday. We let you sleep into 8 o'clock on a Sunday. Isn't that gracious of us? We've got a dedicated Zoom posse that shows up even on Sundays when they have the legitimate right to sleep in after working all week. And they get up early anyway, just to catch the Zoom. If you want to join us on Zoom, you can do it easily. You have to contact Mara, and she will give you the very secret codes. Just write Mara at wisdomofthesages108@gmail.com. Wisdomofthesages108@gmail.com. Also, if you have any questions and answers, we do Q&A day, because Qs are important for your spiritual growth. So you write down your Q, and we will give you an A to the best of our ability. And we do that every Saturday. And we try to thoroughly go through those things. But best, don't write on Facebook. Don't write on Instagram. You can either write wisdomofthesages108@gmail.com, or if you're a member of our Discord group, you can write our Q&As there. Those are the only places we check our Qs.
We check, but
we check, but we delete them, and we say this is so low on our priority list. Yeah, but we. So, and we have a special guest today. First of all, I want to thank, before I get into the special guest, I want to thank everybody that showed up at the Bhakti Center, including Kaustubha, our special guest at the Bhakti Center. Because when I started the class, everybody was saying, yeah, I listen to the Wisdom of the Sages. I'm an other. You know, we had the Saratoga ladies show up. We had people from Pennsylvania. We had, there's so many others out there that are so beautiful. We had the guys from Glassjaw show up. It was cool. It was a great Christopher Lopez, hanging with Christopher Lopez.
Christopher Lopez showed up.
We had a bunch of Zoomers. Who was our Zoomers there yesterday? Oh yeah, Jules Blondina.
You know what made
she
my
had
day?
I had my.
Go ahead, Raghunath. You're running. Go with it. What were you saying?
I'm just going. Bhakti Louie was there in the flesh.
He was there.
Ariana Lindbergh, David Charles Wilson. So the Zoomers showed up. The others showed up, and it was just like such a happy moment. And then Kaustubha showed up. He showed up and made his special guest appearance, and everybody was like, "It's Kaustubha! It's Kaustubha!" And then we wheeled out a big cake, and Mara jumped out of a. Just kidding, Mara wasn't there, but we wanted Mara there.
We did. You know what made my day yesterday, Raghu?
What?
Many things, but one thing is that to find out, because when we're having lunch, I was sitting down with Bhakti Louie, and then Julie Blondina came over. And then they revealed that the two of them, unbeknownst to us, right?
Unbeknownst.
On a weekly basis, those two get on the phone and they study Srimad Bhagavatam together.
You know why? Because there's a lot of Wisdom of the Sages subgroups going on. I don't know if you've checked that Discord thread. There's lots of subgroups going on. There's people dating. We got to start a
there are
Discord
couples
dating
out there.
app for Wisdom of the Sages followers. I'm serious.
I'm
There
serious.
could be money in it, too.
Doesn't have to be about that, Raghu. It could just be.
Yeah, it does. It does.
But it's right. There are all these different kind of study groups that have kind of sprung out of it. So to me, that just warmed my heart right there. thinking of those two.
What do you think
on my
about
phone.
that? Wisdom of the Sages dating
No,
situation.
well, honestly,
you know,
in
because
all
you don't want to date.
seriousness,
Where are you going to meet people nowadays? At a bar?
in all
Where-
seriousness, this is Mother's Day. 1 year ago today, we had Rukmini Devi on the show, right?
Yes.
And she has not so long ago reached out to me because, you know, she's like such a caring person that
Yeah.
she's always thinking of others. And she knows like a lot of people, you know, like in the Bhakti community, you know, they're looking for a good spouse, you know. So she's like, maybe Wisdom at the Sages can help. And I
Right?
said, you know what?
I
Maybe you're
wasn't-
right.
I was serious.
So we got to actually, in all seriousness, we have to look into that.
I know. It's a
Let's
whole
not
thing.
spend too much time on this. We got a special guest here. We got to.
It's a good idea, though. We could talk about. Okay.
We got to
But
do
it-
it. We got
it
to. We got to
can't be-
get someone
it can't be
responsible that can run it.
Arranged. That means you get to meet them. We decide, and you meet them on the wedding day. Let's just bring it back. Keep it real, Kaustubha. Old
Tradition.
school.
Yeah, tradition.
They hold up a cloth so they don't see each other, and they drop the cloth, and it's either like oh.
All right.
I know you.
But we should look into that in all
Okay.
seriousness.
Dating,
All right.
just dating. All right. Anyway, we have a really special guest today, and his name is Jaya Jagannath. I first discovered Jaya Jagannath when I was on pilgrimage in India with all my students, and I told all the students, hey, every night in the evening, they bring on one of the best kirtan leaders, whoever's visiting. And it's like the celebrity kirtan spot. Thousands of people are in that temple room, and
This
they
is in
usually have
Vrindavan?
one like really refined kirtan leader singing at the 6:30 or 6 o'clock time slot. And I went in there, and I heard this beautiful sound, and then I saw this otherworldly man, Jaya Jagannath, and the kirtan was so. And I never saw you before, Jaya Jagannath, it was so beautiful. I want to tell you, I was touched. I took photos of you. I still have them on my phone. Photos of you and videos of you singing. And I was like, who is this? You know how you know when you're a devotee and you're in part of a devotee community, and there's like some news stellar being shows up. And you're like, who's this guy? You were like that. I was starstruck that day. Like, there's a new guy in town I don't know about. Maybe I should be knowing about him. You know, and so. Yeah, you're not a new guy in town. You're just new to me. But welcome to the show, Jaya Jagannath. We wanted to have you for a long time.
Thank you very much for having me. I feel especially honored, and like I've made a special achievement in life by being on this particular podcast.
It's like becoming verified. Prabhu, can I give your official bio that I stole from the internet?
Sure, please.
After 13 years of intense study, meditation, and yoga discipline within the monasteries of the Krishna Bhakti tradition, Jaya Jagannath has recently left the quietism of monasticism. I like that. It's sort of like a hip hop.
And got
The
into
quietism of monasticism to share
Got
the
into his
timeless
Vaishnavism.
wisdom, scholarship, and relevance of the tradition's sacred text, or the Shastra, through song, seminars, webinars, workshops, and regular philosophy classes. As a leader in the educational department, Jai is responsible for creating and teaching literature such as Yoga Sutras, Bhagavad Gita, and other sacred texts.
You see, I gave you the edited version. I told you.
I'm reading the old one.
And you're reading because I don't believe Jaya Jagannath has been responsible for creating the Yoga Sutras. Were you?
Yes, he
Just
did.
make
I
a-
thought you were the
for
writer of the
teaching.
Yoga. You aren't Patanjali?
It actually.
We tried doing a few courses and classes on Yoga Sutras. I have a whole thing for that.
The
You know,
point being, I think that that it needed a little editing.
Right,
Oh,
totally.
Kaustubha edited. I didn't see it. I thought that was part of the same one. Okay. He's also a very familiar face and voice for the Bhakti Center's weekly kirtan experiences like Tuesday night and Thursday night kirtans. Please welcome Jaya Jagannath. Hello.
Man,
That's where I need my little button where it presses the applause, etc., like Namras has. But and I want to say that this whole podcast, part of it started because I copied you. You know that? Because you were giving classes on the Bhagavatam on Zoom before I even heard of Zoom. And then I was like, man, I should do that. It's like I have a bunch of yoga students. They'd probably want to hear a class. Well, and I give class, me and Mara and Gauranga Avatar, we're studying every morning. Why don't we just put it on Zoom and be like Jaya Jagannath. And then we started the Super Soul Sacred Sangha, following in your footsteps, Prabhu.
Oh, well, thank you. I feel extra special now.
You are extra special.
All right. And you know who else we didn't mention, but you know we should mention just officially that we need to also share a little appreciation for all the mothers who are so special out there today, right? It has to be said.
I have to say it. All the mothers out there. My wife, mother of 5. My mom, mother of 7.
Wow.
Jaya Jagannath had a special mom in his life, right? Why don't we start there?
Yes, I often reference her about my achievements in life in terms of good character.
She was responsible.
She is definitely responsible.
Very
She and her belt.
Okay.
And her
Whatever
what?
means necessary.
She and her what?
Her belt.
Or belt. Did your mom hit you with a belt?
Oh, definitely. That's just part of the training growing up.
You know, it's a good thing to note. I got hit with a belt. I had a belt and a yardstick. Those
did
were
too.
my like weapons of choice. And I say weapons of choice because my dad would say, choose one. That was like psychological torture.
Okay. Let's maybe we ought to shift this back. I didn't mean to take it. We're just appreciating mothers today. But Jaya Jagannath, you know, really why we want to have you on the show today is just because, you know, our thing is Srimad Bhagavatam. That's what Wisdom of the Sages is all about. Every day we read from it. But you are a person that, you know, we respect as a Bhagavatam scholar, a person like a Bhagavatam aficionado, a Bhagavatam enthusiast, you know. You have you know, I had the fortune of kind of working with you at the Bhakti Center and with others, you know, including Vasudeva Prabhu and Ganesham. We kind of put together that, you know, our Bhagavat Shravana program where, you know, we were kind of teaching it, but going through it together. And you know, your knowledge and your enthusiasm for the Bhagavatam is contagious and is a really valuable contribution. So we wanted to get you on the show to discuss Bhagavatam.
Yay.
It's one of your favorite subjects, right? Like of all the things in the world that we could become enthusiastic about, there's so many things out there, right?
Yes.
And so when someone like has navigated their way through it all and somehow landed on Srimad Bhagavatam, it's like, this is what I'm enthusiastic about. And actually, that's all of the people that you're looking at right now, you know, on Zoom. They're like that, you know. They're all somehow we've all bonded around the Srimad Bhagavatam. So we want to get you, you know, on here and share some of your thoughts on Srimad Bhagavatam. But let's just start by, could you just share with us what is so special? You know, what to speak of so much literature. There's so much wisdom literature. There's so much yoga literature. There's so much Vedic literature. What makes Bhagavatam so special?
I think there are probably 2 ways you can answer that. Subjectively is the most personal, like what's so special about Bhagavatam for me on a subjective
level. Yeah, let's
level.
hear both ways.
And there's, you know, there's like what the tradition says about the Bhagavatam, you know, the objective reasons for why the Bhagavatam is so special.
Okay.
For me, its impact subjectively is because it reasons to the conclusion of love of a romantic type, actually. And just sharing maybe a little bit of my background, my spirituality. When I got into Krishna consciousness when I was 18.
Okay.
And
you were in Chicago at the time.
I was in Chicago. I was training as a ballet dancer. I was looking to get into a dance career at that time. And anyway, as I like to say, all spiritual journeys begin with serious questions. I have this little maxim that I really want to, I think I want to like copyright it because I like it and it's nice. But we're
going to steal it right now.
Oh, I think I know this one. Yeah, forget
Mara,
it.
get
Got
ready.
It.
I have this saying that evolution of inquiry precedes evolution of being. Insofar as the depth.
Why don't you repeat that for us?
Yeah, evolution of inquiry precedes evolution of being. And the reason I say that, because according to the depth of the question, there's a depth of revelation of knowledge. And with that knowledge, you can transform your being. So evolution of inquiry precedes evolution of being.
So
if
then
we're only
in that
asking
sense,
questions about Games of Thrones, okay, that's going to give you a certain corresponding knowledge, but that won't help you to transform your life.
So if we want to elevate our life, we have to elevate the questions that we ask.
Yes. And and when people get into spiritual life, there's usually a question of a spiritual or existential nature that's like vexing you. And the question that was vexing me at the age of 18 was, is romantic love a real thing? That was the question that really was like vexing my mind.
I sense some skepticism on your 18-year-old.
Yes, I was skeptical because of observation. I was seeing, you know, my friends around me just kind of like, you know, as we used to say, kicking it, but not kicking it means like a mutual exploitation agreement. And I'm seeing like marriages break up. I'm seeing these like, I think one of the weirdest things for me growing up was watching like a TV series. You know, in the first season, it's like this one epic couple. And then by the end of the first season, there's a problem. And the second season, they break it off and hook up with other people in the show. And then by the end of
like
the
these
series,
reality shows, you mean?
Not even a reality show. It could be a reality show. It could be a sci-fi show. It can be any sort of show.
Okay.
And it's like by the end of the series, every character has hooked up with every other character. So I'm like, that doesn't seem really genuine. So I had this, you know, big skepticism about romantic love, which actually prevented me from involving myself in any sort of romantic relationships whatsoever. And I specifically remember asking my mother at a Starbucks inside of a grocery store. It's a strange, specific memory. But I remember specifically asking her, will I ever find love?
How old are you?
I was 18. So I was 18. And, you know, this is the question that's vexing me. Will I ever find love? And she gave me like a mother answer, like everyone finds love and something to that effect. And I was just like, womp, womp. Like it didn't land at all. My skepticism increased 100-fold. So I ended up reading anyway. So I entered into like spiritual investigation with this question in the back of my mind. I was attracted to like Western religious philosophy because they had like a conclusion that seemed to promote some sort of relationship with God. But they didn't have like a very rich philosophy that led you to that conclusion. So it felt very sentimental. When I was investigating Eastern traditions, they had like this very rich philosophical culture, an interesting word, taxonomic. I don't know if you ever heard this word before.
Mara, get on that one. Taxonomy.
Taxonomy means like, you know, most Eastern traditions, they are very taxonomic, means they're very into like categorizing things into strict, you know, ontological categories or philosophical categories, and then expanding those categories more. Tattvas. So it's like this rich philosophical culture, but the conclusions were often like, you cease to exist, like nothing, or you merge and become one with everything, which I also didn't find very attractive. And so when I got in touch with Krishna conscious philosophy, which is based on the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's like this rich taxonomic philosophy, like most Eastern traditions, that reasons to the conclusion of a relationship with God, and that too, even of a romantic type. And so I was like, wow, this was the question that's been vexing me all this time. And here's a philosophy that's like extremely rich, but it has this extremely beautiful conclusion. It's like this combination of head and heart, which is very beautiful. And so because of that, I decided to commit more energy to this particular path of understanding. And it's a path that's based on the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the way that the Srimad Bhagavatam is important for me on a subjective level is that it actually gives a conclusion of divine love with God, even in a sort of romantic type, even up to that point, I should say. Not that that's the only type of love, but even up to this point, this idea is somehow in the tradition. And that's how it's like subjectively impacted me. It's interesting. I should say that my first book, an introduction to the Srimad Bhagavatam, was The Science of Self-Realization. Okay.
Which is, maybe we could describe what that is. That's like a compilation of letters, conversations, interviews with Srila Prabhupada.
Right. Great intro book, by the way. Science of Self-Realization.
Yeah, it was my first book. And I remember, so I have this question in the back of my mind. Is romantic love authentic, or is there such a thing as genuine, authentic romantic love? And in the course of that book, there's this letter that a lady writes to Srila Prabhupada. I think her name is like Lynn Ludwig. And
Okay.
she's disappointed with Prabhupada's disciples because the disciples are really negative in her view. They're always negative. So she's like telling Prabhupada, you need to handpick these pieces of sunshine. She uses like language like this. It's all about love. You should allow love to be, and love is. She's using like this sort of language.
Okay.
And so in Prabhupada's reply,
It was blunt.
oh yeah. Well, at first he was like very like sympathetic to what she was saying. He says, I apologize on behalf of the disciples. They are newly out of the material energy and material preoccupations. And so they may overindulge in criticism of it in order to avoid, again, becoming victim of material interest.
That's a great answer.
It was. Well, that's how he
half
starts
of it.
it off.
Yeah.
And then he follows it up. And if you can't appreciate it, it's probably because you yourself are victims of material preoccupation. And then I'm just like, oops, what's going on here? And then after that, he says, and this love thing, he's like, you've mentioned love many times in your letter, but you should know there is no love in this material world. Ooh. That is false propaganda. And I remember that hit me it hit me very intensely, because this is like the question that's like in my heart. This is the question that I want a philosophical and a visceral answer to that's satisfying. And he's just like dismissing it. There is no love in the material world. That is false propaganda. And he says, actually, in the Sanskrit language, there is no word for material love. There's only the word kama, which means lust. Only love is there. It's of a spiritual nature. Of course, he develops this idea later on in the book.
Happy Mother's Day, everyone.
Everyone, those feelings you have for your mother, they're not love.
Listen, I'm not going that far. I'm just saying what I read, what impacted me. And
okay.
But he goes on to explain that genuine love is of a spiritual nature. And so one has to discover the spiritual foundation of who they are, of the spiritual foundation of reality, in order for it to be authentic love. I'm going to use this word, authentic love. Otherwise, the love is like a simulation of the real thing, or a facsimile of the real thing.
So
okay,
could you phrase
Jai,
it?
let me jump in this for a second, Kaustubha.
All right.
We just want to explain here. There's many nuances of love, right? You could just see a bunch of guys could see a beautiful girl walking by and can say, "Oh, love her." Right? They don't know her. They don't know anything about her, but they just use this word so cheaply. I love her. Then, of course, there's a person, I've been dating for a few months, and after a few months of dating, you just say, I love you. Really? You've been dating for 3 months. What is love? And then you've been with a person for 70 years. You've been through everything. You've raised kids. I love you. Or a mother's love for a child, which is like the deepest type of love. But that whole spectrum, and it's very high, right? A mother giving birth to a child, that's a very high love. Or people that have like slugged it out throughout their entire life, and they've been deeply connected with each other. That's very high. Even that, Prabhupada's calling iron compared to gold. To quote Shelter, iron and gold appear the same, but one is costly to attain. So you have love of the material world, and even the highest is still of this world. And then we open up the curtains and we realize, actually, bring me a higher love. Oh, that's where we're going with this, Jaya Jagannath, right? Yeah. It's not like love of this world is evil. Sometimes it's very base. Sometimes it's very high, but there's a next level love. Please explain.
Yes. I don't. That was a pretty good explanation. But yeah, I'm using the language right now, authentic versus like a facsimile. And yeah, authentic love, I would say, and I would argue that authentic love, as far as the Bhagavatam is concerned, is also possible within the material sphere of experience, but it requires a discovery of the spiritual foundation of reality, without which your love will remain a simulation or a facsimile of what it could be, or the authentic experience of what that love is. And I found that to be a deeply satisfying answer, because it reconciled the desire for the experience of authentic love with the observation of like exploitation and things that didn't seem authentic. So it was like an explanation that helped to reconcile, my observation and my desire for something real, and give it like an explanation. And all of it was based on the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the Srimad Bhagavatam becomes like a very important book for me on a subjective level because of the question that was the foundation for my spiritual investigation.
So you're saying there can be that authentic love, that gold in this world, unconditional love to other jivas, or are the jivas, is real love only meant for the jiva and Bhagavan? Or can the jivas have love for each other, or just concern? You know what I mean? It can't be unconditional, right?
Yeah, again, it depends on how we define that word. I think the word for love in our tradition is prema. And that has like a very specific connotation. And when you translate it into English as love, then it becomes very confusing, actually. But to answer your question, and far as my understanding is concerned, love is meant for God or Krishna.
Okay.
But Krishna isn't like an ordinary person. So if I love you, then, especially here in the material world, to love one individual is in some ways to be at odds with other individuals, because that's the nature of like the duality experience. When you love something here, you hate things that are opposed to the object of love. But and that's possible because we have this concept of ourselves being separate from each other. I'm separate from you, you're separate from me, and so on. But Krishna, and this is one of the major talking points of the Bhagavatam, Krishna is a non-dual foundation of everything. So there's nothing apart from him. So to love God essentially is to love everything connected to him, which is everything. And one of the prominent analogies given to this idea is that if you water the root of the tree, then that goes towards the whole tree, as opposed to trying to water each individual leaf, which is, first of all, not possible. Provided if you have like a big tree, for example, it's not possible to water each individual leaf, and nor would that actually nourish the tree. But if you water the root of the tree, that goes to all the leaves, all the branches, the trunk, and everything. And so God is something closer to that image. That's not a perfect image, but he's closer to that. He's the non-dual. This is very important for Vedanta traditions in general. We believe that reality is fundamentally non-dual consciousness. And as far as our tradition is concerned, that non-dual consciousness is Krishna, actually. He is the Advaya Gyan Tattva. This word Advaya Gyan means a non-dual conscious entity. He is that entity. So nothing is actually apart from him. So to love Bhagavan or to love Krishna that naturally translates to everything connected to him, which is everything. And so that's why I'm saying that the discovery of that non-dual reality is at the heart of what it means to love authentically, as far as this tradition kind of articulates itself. And without that discovery, we don't want to say that your love is fake or bogus, but I like this word facsimile. I don't want to use even the word inauthentic. I
like it,
but it's like a facsimile. It's it lacks completion. That may be a very nicer way of putting it. It lacks completion, and because it lacks completion, then you'll be forced to engage with the world of karma. Now, this word karma means activity, easily translated, but Jiva Goswami, who's like he's one of the main philosophers for articulating this understanding of Srimad Bhagavatam, even to audiences outside of devotional communities. And he defines karma in his main treatise of the Bhagavatam, known as the Bhagavat Sandarbha. It's 6 books, a treatise on the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he writes about karma. He says karma is something that an incomplete person, he uses the word apurna. Apurna means a person who is feeling incompletion. Karma is the activity that an incomplete person does to become complete. And which I think is an amazing definition of karma. Like, you can think of it on like a practical level. If I feel an emptiness in my stomach, then I move around to, fill that emptiness with food. And if I feel an incompletion in the heart, then I'm forced to move around to fill the completion of the heart. So basically, as long as this is Bhagavat my articulation of it, as long as we fail to discover the non-dual foundation of reality, our experiences of love will be incomplete. And that feeling of incompleteness will cause us to engage in the world of karma. And when we engage in the world of karma, the result is known as karma bandhana, the bondage of karma. And which comes not only in terms of like the repeated birth death cycle, but it comes in terms of the experience of like frustration. And, you know, I think we all know what that is like. I don't need to explain it too much. We know what it's like to experience karma bondage, the bondage of karma. So therefore, it's important to really discover the spiritual roots of something like love. Otherwise, incompletion is our lot. And the result of incompletion is a very scary world, because karma gets really dark. Like the feelings of incompleteness and the things that it leads to, I don't even think I need to explain that. It can get dark.
Goes dark.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes. You know, what I find interesting.
You know, I think we talk about this. Go ahead, Prabhu.
Okay. What I find interesting about your kind of journey to the Bhagavatam is it seemed like you're approaching from what we could call a very Jnanic kind of viewpoint, like skepticism towards material happiness.
Sure, right? A little bit. I was a little skeptical, not fully. I really wanted it to be true. Okay. Like I wanted it to be true now. I want material love to be a real thing. Like in my heart of hearts, I want that to be like a fully authentic experience that is going to be completely satisfying to my body, mind, and soul. I really like, that's how
you just got to find the right person.
Yeah. It's like, so there was the skepticism.
Looking. You got to keep looking. They're waiting for you. That puzzle piece.
I'm there. I'm all for it. And so I do, my approach there has an element of skepticism, which was just, for me, it was just practical, because I was like, I'm coming from a broken home. I'm seeing all my friends like mistreat each other. So it was just like my skepticism was just very practical, but I wanted to be real. Like I wanted.
Fair enough. And so maybe that even explains it more, because someone with that kind of skepticism about the material world in their pursuit, like you start to dive into Eastern thought. It's logical that someone may tend more towards the Jnanic, you know, approach in the impersonal conception of God, and people that embrace that, they're very Upanishadic in their what they're attracted to, and so they'll downgrade the idea of Bhagavatam and Krishna and his pastimes and his Leela as being, that's nice, but come on, it's not like the real thing. It's not the ultimate.
Yes.
But your kind of Jnanic approach led you to Bhagavatam. And because there we find something that I'm not sure that everybody gets, or I know everybody doesn't get, you know, that here you had like, it's kind of, you know, if your thesis is I can find material happiness in this world through love or whatever, and then the antithesis of that, no, break it down, look at it, observe it for real, and see that it's impure and that it lacks, it's incomplete, it doesn't ultimately satisfy. There's something beyond love. And then you come to this synthesis in Bhagavatam, where it has all the Jnanic, clarity.
Yes.
But it's revealing a philosophy or theology, or reality. Like you phrased it, that the spiritual foundation of reality is ultimately divine love.
Yes. You've articulated, that's your specialty, very nicely. One of the important ideas that comes up in the Bhagavatam, the Bhagavatam spends quite a bit of time trying to argue against the notion of impersonalism, because the natural kind of corollary of the experience of being jaded with material world is impersonalism. It's the natural corollary. I think Srila Prabhupada would tell the story of sour grape story. You know the sour grape story, right?
The fox and the
fox. He's like trying to jump for some grapes, and it's just outside of his reach. So he concludes these grapes are sour.
Right. They must not be good. If I'm not getting it,
if I can't get it, then these grapes are sour. So the natural corollary of trying for enjoyment in this world and having it frustrated, and that too in profound ways, is you become attracted to impersonalism. And so the Bhagavatam is actually aware that this thing can happen to the souls in this world. And therefore they would disallow themselves the opportunity for a higher level completion in divine love, because the tendency to superimpose their material experience onto a divine realm of personalism. And so so in order to counteract this problem, one of the biggest talking points of the Bhagavatam actually is the character of Sukadeva Goswami. He's a speaker of the Bhagavatam. And
can you just give us, going into him, just describe him briefly? Because our people know of him, but it's always good to go back because people come
definitely. Sukadeva Goswami is the son of the author of all the Vedic literatures, Srila Vyasadeva. And Srila Vyasadev's own estimation, he's the most realized of all his students. I mean, it's his son, but it's also his student. And he's the most realized of all his students. Well, why is he the most realized? Well, it is described that he is, and one of the important verses of the Bhagavatam describing him, Swasuka Nibrita Chetas, Tavyudyastanya Bhava. This is a very important line. Swasuka Nibrita Chetas means he was always absorbed in the happiness of self-realization. Swasuka. Swasuka means a happiness that is inherent to our souls, actually. And because in our present condition, our consciousness is looking outward. We don't actually notice the happiness that is inherent to our own souls. And so we project ourselves outward towards objects and we try to find happiness there. But consciousness was directed inward towards his own self, and he was experiencing the happiness. So as a result of that happiness that is inherent to the soul, tavyudastanya bhava, he had no awareness of anything else in this material world. Like nothing else in this material world could attract him. So much so, as the story goes, he was walking in the forest, 16-year-old boy, and 16 years means prime time in terms of like
hormones,
energy and sexual attraction. That's like prime time. And 16-year-old boy, he's walking through the forest with no clothes on. He walks past beautiful women, young girls who are bathing in some like small lake there. And they look at him, he looks at them, and they're like, yeah, cool. Like there's no agitation. And the way the story goes is that, and I don't know if this is true, I think it could be true, but basically ladies have a superpower. They know what's on your mind. You gotta be careful. They can make out what you're thinking, So they basically could make out that in the mind of this young boy, 16-year-old boy, that he had no concept of man or woman. There was no such concept because he was absorbed in the happiness of his own soul. And therefore they didn't feel agitated. They just kept bathing like he was
no need to cover themselves.
No need to cover themselves. And there was no problem. And there wasn't. He actually had no attraction, practically didn't even notice them. Vyasadeva.
It's great to really, I love how you're showing this. I love how you're repainting this story, because usually you just breeze over this, but imagine a bunch of young girls, imagine a naked teenage boy, immediately the girls, generally their creep meter would go up, in the red, and sure enough, right? But nothing happens. They're like, this guy's cool. There's not whatsoever. Just let him go.
This is a very important story for the Bhagavatam, actually, to demonstrate the position of Sukadeva Goswami's non-attraction to matter. So, with that non-attraction to matter is a very important point of establishing the divine reality of personalism also. So he's not attracted. His father is running after him, just a few feet behind him. And when his father, the author of the Vedas, runs by the same ladies, they're like, oh, snap, cover up. And Vyasa, he's taking it back.
Did they say snap?
He didn't say snap, but, that was the bob. That was the feeling behind it. And, for Vyasa, he's actually taken aback by this. He's like, wait, my son is 16 years old. That's prime time. Y'all didn't cover up, but when I'm old enough to be your grandfather, and you're covering up because of me. Like, what's the deal here? And they kind of explain, this is explained in the commentaries, that we can see that he's absorbed in the happiness of his own self. He doesn't even have the concept, or let's say appreciate the concept of man and woman. Even that duality doesn't attract him whatsoever, which is like the main attraction in duality. Whereas you are a householder, so that means even you may be self-realized also, but you're identifying with that duality to some degree. And so we got to cover up. And so Vyasa is very much taken aback by this. So this is Sukadeva Goswami. This is his position in enlightenment. No attraction to the world of duality whatsoever. And yet this Sukadeva Goswami, api means although this is his position, ajituru chila lila akrishna saras tadiyam. His essence, the word sara means essence, his essence, which refers to his absorption and the happenings of the self, he was brought out of his essence towards the pastimes of Krishna and this divine, spiritual, personal reality. And the whole idea of this particular statement of the Bhagavatam is to show that, yes, the material love, going back to my background with attraction to Bhagavatam, the material love, can, in a sense, is like negative integers. And when you experience the frustration of that, you can lose attraction to negative integers and come from negative integers to zero, which is like impersonalism, where you just, it's devoid of any material concept, any material duality.
Everything else is empty.
Everything else is empty. But then above zero, there are positive integers also.
Right.
And the spiritual world constitutes the positive integers of all the things that you've only experienced in an incomplete form in the material world. So there's form, there's spiritual form, just like we have a world of matter where the forms are made of matter. There's a world of consciousness where the forms are made of consciousness, the name is made of consciousness, the qualities are conscious, and the experiences of emotions like love is also conscious and spiritual and blissful in nature. So you're going from negative integers to zero and from zero to positive integers if you enter into this divine personalism.
I love
Sukadeva Goswami's character
analogies.
Yeah, this analogy is Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master. He used to like to give this particular analogy. And Sukadeva Goswami's example is critical for establishing this notion of a divine personal reality that is beyond the jaded or the tendency towards jaded experiences that we have in the world of matter.
Well, you see, this is so interesting. And I think it's so important for our listeners to hear this, because this idea, okay, when we're going to get to the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, and when we get there, it's going to sound like stories.
Right.
It's going to sound like romantic stories.
Right.
Is this the kind of thing that a serious Vedantin, a serious yogi, is someone that has that capacity to move through this world and distinguish reality from illusion? Are these stories the kind of thing that kind of person is attracted to? And so therefore we have this example of Sukadeva Goswami.
Yes.
And I love as Raghu said, I love the way that you're kind of like laying it out so clear that he was so capable of being beyond material attraction that even these girls could pick it up, right?
Yes.
Like it was so profound in his character that it was almost like you could not help but pick it up.
Yes.
And so in his case, his material detachment wasn't just well developed; it was absolutely developed.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And yet still.
He was attracted to this.
He's attracted to Bhagavatam. He's
To
attracted to
Krishna,
Krishna, running through the forests, lifting Govardhan Hill, playing games, tossing the ball around with his friends,
Yes.
and having romantic relationships with the girls of
Absolutely.
Vrindavan.
So that becomes, again, for me on a subjective level, that becomes absolutely critical for my own personal investigation into spiritual reality. Again, it helps to clarify why the experiences that I was observing in this world ultimately appear to end up in frustration. And of course, on a personal level, I didn't have good experiences of romantic love around me ever. So naturally, I may conclude, but even for those, who have healthier experiences, more stable and more healthy, still at a certain point, you talk to a lot of them. At least over the years, I've talked to a lot of them, and they kind of have this like that sort of response, like, yeah, it was cool when we were kids, but now it's just kind of like a sacrifice.
Well, you know what? It's interesting, but it seems like even the healthy romantic like that. What is the trajectory of the healthy romantic relationship?
Yes.
Right. The excitement you actually have to lose it if it's going to
Yes.
be healthy, right?
It's actually a really good thing, you know, and I think when you come into a consumer world where the sex appeal is the main marketing tool, and whether you're listening to music or you're watching TV shows or whatever, it's a little scary to us to hear that, hey guys, you should lose this part, you know, and that's like really good. That's like really healthy for your soul. And it's just like when you're attached to something and you can't appreciate how that attachment is bringing you down. Who has had that experience of being attached to something and can't appreciate how it's bringing you down? And someone says, hey, this can help you lose your attachment. You're like, no, I don't want to lose my attachment. Or like, you know, when you read the Yoga Sutras, I find the Yoga Sutras can be summarized in the first four sutras, right? The first sutra introduces the subject matter. The second sutra defines it. And then the third sutra gives like the result of, you know, completing Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. And basically means like all your emotions stop, all your feelings, intellection, ego, all of that is like Nirodha. It literally means like, you could say devoid of. Yeah. And you can be situated in your own self. I remember first reading that, I was like,
all the good stuff in life.
Yeah, like, wait, I mean, I know I have some like unhealthy emotions, but I got some good ones too. I want to keep those. And so it doesn't strike you as super attractive initially without a little bit more of a insight into the nature of spiritual subject matter.
Well, it's the antithesis and not the full synthesis, right?
Right. And right. So here's the synthesis that there's a positive integer world.
Right.
And in order for you to enter into that positive integer world, you coming to the 0 point when it comes to material experiences is actually really healthy. And I feel my understanding of the old world culture as it dealt with the conventional relationships was to kind of help you bring you to that 0 point. Like that's like the highest it can bring you to that 0 point.
Okay. This is very helpful now. In others, I want to make sure that I'm following.
Yes.
Clearly. So you're saying like the things of this material world are zero integers. In other words, we mistake them as having value, but actually, without any spiritual connection, they're empty of value.
Yes.
But then the spiritual content is the positive integer. So in other words, you can have 6 zeros and they have absolutely no value. But when you put a 1 in front of it, you have 1 million. It has value.
Yes.
And so now, to extend that, please like continue from there with that analysis where you're going.
In other words, this is per my understanding of what Shastra is presenting.
Yeah.
The conventional relationships or conventional experiences, they can be, let's use the word co-opted for and used as a tool for your own spiritual enlightenment. And that way they're not inherently negative. But they can be experienced as a negative when devoid of the spiritual aim or the spiritual pursuit. But once the spiritual aim is introduced into the scenario, all of a sudden they can be used as a tool for helping launch you into that spiritual reality.
Okay.
In fact, in the Bhagavatam, and coming back to just this topic of the Bhagavatam, there's this shloka at the end of the 11th canto. Let me see if I can find it real quick. It's at the end of the Uddhava Gita. So in the 11th canto, you have Bhagavad Gita is there, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. And then there's the Uddhava Gita where Krishna is speaking to another one of his exalted devotees, Uddhava. And at the end of that, there's this shloka, which one of our commentators says is the essence of the Bhagavatam. Right. Okay, I got to pull it up now. Hold on. He says that this verse is the essence of the entire Bhagavatam. And he says one should take this verse and put it into a jewel, lock it, and wear it around one's throat. In his commentary, something to that effect. It's in 11th canto, chapter 29. I'm just pulling it up really quick. It won't strike
jewelry?
You. Huh?
Looking for some new jewelry, people? Wear this right around your neck.
It's interesting because just looking here at the translation of it, it doesn't strike you like as the most amazing shloka of the Bhagavatam. But here's a statement. This is 11th canto, chapter 29, verse 22, for those who like to look things up.
Say that again, please. 11?
Yeah, 11th canto, the 11th volume, chapter 29, verse number 22.
22.
And very interesting statement. This process is the supreme intelligence of the intelligent and the cleverness of the most clever. For by following it, now this is talking about Bhakti Yoga, or in the context of the language I was using, when you have a spiritual aim for your existence,
Yeah.
and then how you engage with the world of matter around you. So when that aim is there, so this process is the supreme intelligence of the intelligent and the cleverness of the most clever. For by following it, one can, in this very life, make use of the temporary and unreal to achieve me, the eternal reality.
Okay, that's absolutely brilliant, right? So in other words, sticking with that analogy,
Yes.
if all the zeros in life, if I'm identifying them as having value, then I'm going to get lost in that, and I'm going to be disappointed and frustrated, hurt down the road, at least.
Yes.
So the first step, the intelligent or clever person recognizes there's no lasting value in this on its own.
Right.
But then when you put the positive integer of the Srimad Bhagavatam in front of it, then all of those things that, whether it be material beauty, material love, material happiness, home, family, occupation, role in society, all these things, they're zeros because they're all time bound, and you're going to lose them quickly, and they're going to disappoint you in one way or another. But when you put the vision of the Bhagavatam in front of them, then suddenly their value is revealed. And so now you're not just clever, recognizing what they lack, but you're clever. What was it again?
Intelligent
Amongst the intelligent, or clever amongst the clever.
Yes.
By recognizing how it can become spiritually valuable.
Yes, that's very powerful synthesizing principle. And it does away with this sort of emptiness that the sort of Eastern philosophical world kind of promotes, minus the vision of the Bhagavatam, which was part of my own lack of attraction to it. Like, I was really attracted to how philosophical and, again, taxonomic these Eastern traditions were, but their conclusions were I kind of like my emotions. I kind of like, some of my attachment. Why I only viewed in a negative light. And here's the synthesis that comes in the Bhagavatam that says, no, all these things actually have value when, and then you connect it to this, but it doesn't have inherent value. So that is the mistake that souls make as far as the Bhagavatam is concerned. The mistake that souls make, in fact, they use this word anartha. And the word anartha is translated in different ways, but the word artha means value. Sometimes, in fact, the reality itself, like the ultimate reality, is referred to as artha. Just that word itself is sometimes used to refer to ultimate reality. And anartha means something that doesn't have value, but you ascribe value to it. And when I say doesn't have value, it doesn't have inherent value, but you ascribe inherent value to it. This is called as anartha. So the main mistake, and this is again according to the Bhagavatam, and one of the verses that we had hoped to get to, Yaya samohita jiva atmanam shrigunatmakam paropi manyute anartam. This verse is describing Vyasa's, going into his samadhi and seeing souls afflicted by what is known as Maya. And then because of their affliction of Maya, they have this anartha problem. And this anartha problem is that something that doesn't have inherent value, they ascribe inherent. And when we say inherent, it means it's like eternally a part of that thing. But nothing in the material world can have inherent value because it only has value for subjects who are looking at the object in different ways. But you ascribe inherent value to something that doesn't have inherent value, and then you begin to engage with it like that. And then your whole life is,
the
finished.
formless mist.
Yes.
Yeah.
The point. In fact, I was hearing this word recently, sin, on another podcast that I do. We were interviewing Raghunath, and he said the etymology of the word sin, which I never knew this, and it makes it so much easier to digest this word.
Okay.
Is to miss the mark.
Oh, okay.
He said this is the etymology of the word sin, is to miss the mark. And I was like, whoa, that gives a lot of context for statements that I've encountered in the Bhagavatam and in our Gaudiya literature, where it says, if it's not bhakti, it's sin. And I remember thinking like, man, y'all are kind of y'all need to relax a little bit. Y'all been so extra, okay, they're not into bhakti, but it's sin because there's not bhakti, I was just like, relax.
Right.
And but then when I heard this etymology that sin means to miss the mark, I was like, wow, yep, you're sinful.
Okay.
Like we're sinful. We're missing the mark because we're ascribing inherent value to that which doesn't have inherent value, and we're missing the mark. And the mark is our own soul's potential for completion. And the mark is, connection with that non-dual ground of all reality,
Gotcha.
which is Krishna.
So Vyasadeva gave so much vast literature, but there's so much of it we could easily miss the mark.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And so Bhagavatam is specifically described to help hit the mark.
Yes.
We've also been working with that word sin also, because when you say it, it prescribes a judgment from God. Whereas it's once you say miss the mark, or what's the word we've been using to replace it with? Kaustubha?
Different things. One was misdeeds, used crippling or something.
Misdeeds,
like
crippling, yeah.
Misdeeds,
it puts the burden more on us. We've missed the mark. We've done something, and because of that, it's affecting us. Not like hitting the nail on the head.
Yes, it's important that I feel like that distinction is important, because one of the, let's say one of the things that makes one not attracted to the concept of a personal God, at least as we've experienced it in the Western world, which is like the Middle Eastern traditions, is like that strong judgment layer. And honestly, sidebar, there's one of the things I really appreciated about Krishna. He was like, I'm doing my thing, homie. You do your thing too. But I'm going to just let
and when you're ready, come on back.
Yeah, I'm going to just let you know, if you do it like that, you're going to get burned. But, do your thing. And I kind of really appreciate that very detached approach. Like, and I, when you hear statements like, for example, here's a really a stronger one in the Bhagavad Gita. Ya shastri vidyam ustregya vartate kamakaritaha. So he says, those who don't follow the injunctions of Shastra, right? We have this uncomfortable relationship with injunctions. Like, excuse me, don't impose on my life. Instead of seeing like an injunction as like, I'm looking out for you, mom says,
information.
My mom is like, don't run in the street. And I don't want to follow that injunction because it feels like an imposition. And then she has to get heavier with me and pull out the belt. Whack, whack, whack. I said, don't go on the street. Like, now I understand. But as a child, I feel it as an imposition. As I grow into maturity, I'm like, wow, she was looking out for me. So similarly, you have like these injunctions. So Krishna's saying, you don't want to follow the injunctions, these sort of boundaries, right. Which, I'm trying to look out for you, but you don't want to follow that. And instead you do as you like. Vartate kama karata, you act according to your own desire. Then you will not achieve happiness. You will not get perfection, and you'll not reach the ultimate destination. So when you first read that, you like, why you judge me? And it's like, no, homie, I'm telling you, don't touch fire.
You can do it, but you're not going to.
But if you touch fire,
you want to go.
You're going to get burned.
Yeah.
That verse is so good because it's not only will you not get param gatim, not only will you not get the highest destination, you won't even be happy.
Right.
You won't even get happiness. Merit,
it's like, well, are you cursing
that on the board?
me?
That's a great verse.
Are you cursing me? No, homie. I'm chilling over here in the spiritual world having a great time, where the substance is made of bliss. So I ain't got nothing. I ain't got no beef with you. I ain't got nothing against you. I'm just like trying to let you know that you're missing the mark. That's what I'm trying to inform you. You're missing the mark. And that's going to lead to the experience of compounded frustration, which becomes very dangerous. It actually becomes very dangerous in the mature world.
Jaya Jagannath, it's been absolutely fantastic having you here. We're running out of time. We got to bring you back.
Quick.
You're one of these guys we got to bring back. But for our listeners that want more Jaya Jagannath, where do they go? Will they find you online?
Yeah, I mean, I have social media, Urban Sage Deliberates, but I think my most consistent content, I'm on this platform called Bodhaka, which is like a devotional NBC, and it has different shows on there. And I do a show on there called Arise, the Honest Man's Podcast. And the
Arise. So how would they
Arise.
find that? How would they find that? They Google search Arise.
Yeah, you can Google search Arise, the Honest Man podcast, or you can go to Facebook and go to Bodhaka. The Bodhaka is the name of the platform. We're also on
How do you spell that?
Spotify and all the different Apple podcasts,
and
and
all
we're
that.
on all those podcasting platforms as
How do you
Arise, the
spell
Honest
Bodhaka?
Man podcast.
How do you spell Bodhaka? Just so they can.
Bodhaka.
Yes, that.
All right.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. I could have just kept on going with that.
Yeah, I'm surprised that we had a direction we had hoped to go, but I think
This
I
was
guess
good.
go the way it
This was
goes.
good. You're just going to
We
come
had
back.
flow.
Yeah. Thanks
We'll
everybody
bring
for
it back.
joining us. Thanks to our phenomenal guest, Jaya Jagannath Prabhu. Check him out at Bodhaka, An Honest Man's Podcast, or Urban Sage Deliberates. You can follow him on Instagram. He's always got great words of wisdom. I'm one of those guys who just listens secretly in the back. I like it. Thanks everybody for joining us live. We're back tomorrow at 5 a.m. If you like what we're doing here, you can go to patreon.com/wisdom of the sages. It's a community-supported podcast. We appreciate everybody who's contributing and help keep this boat floating. Remember, we have 2 Wisdom of the Sages retreats coming up. One in Long Beach, California. For all you Californians, come on down to Long Beach, take the weekend off and chill out there. It's the first weekend of June, and we're gonna get a link
4th,
up
5th,
for
and
that.
6th.
Yeah, 4th and 6th, and then also the second week of June in New York City at the Bhakti Center. Someone said
11,
yesterday,
12,
so
and
where do we?
13.
Yeah, someone said, where do we sleep? It's not a sleepover. Someone was coming with their sleeping bag, showing up. Where do I go? You gotta have to get an Airbnb somewhere. I'm sorry, we can't take care of you. But come visit us in New York City. It's a whole weekend, and it's the weekend of the Jagannath Rath Yatra Festival. So it's going to be wonderful.
Right.
We hope to see everybody, all you others, all you Californians, all you Zoomies. Thanks everybody for joining us. And now we must dance.